Please be seated. And now it gives me great pleasure to begin our tribute to our two contributor inductees. Our first inductee today is an individual who embodies the word courage. His tireless and unyielding dedication to the rise of African American tennis players and champions is unparalleled. Through quiet diplomacy during a time of racial separation, he opened the doors that once barred many talented individuals from even the opportunity to compete. He was responsible for launching the careers of Althea Gibson and Arthur Ashe, as well as countless other athletes. Today we posthumously induct Dr. Robert Whirlwind Johnson into the International Tennis Hall of Fame. I'm very pleased to tell you that Dr. Johnson's grandson, Lance Johnson, will accept on his grandfather's behalf. To introduce Lance today is a dear friend. And that woman's name is Jeannie Matusimi Ashe. Please welcome Jeannie Ashe.
Thank you, Chris, for your wonderful introduction. So, when asked the question, how did Dr. Johnson make an impact on Arthur's life? I think the best way is to look at what each of them accomplished in their lives. Consider these comparisons. Dr. Robert Walter Johnson was an influential force for social change. Arthur Robert Ashe Jr. was an influential force for social change. Dr. Johnson was a visionary who saw potential in Althea Gibson, a tall, rangy young woman with remarkable athletic ability. Dr. Johnson also saw potential in Arthur, even though he seemed anything but a prodigy, painfully shy and pipe cleaner skinny. On the other hand, during a goodwill tour to Africa with Stan Smith in the 1970s, Arthur visited the Cameroons, where he played with young aspiring African boys who loved the game of tennis. One stepped up to hit with Arthur on a makeshift court, and as Arthur described, hit the ball with a wooden paddle with such talent and conviction that Arthur went straight to a phone and immediately placed a call to Philippe Chatrier, head of the French Tennis Federation, and said, Philippe, you have a young colonial here who you need to see. His name was Yannick Noah. Dr. Johnson decided to become a doctor because even having earned the nickname Whirlwind, he knew that football was not a lucrative profession in the 1940s. Arthur Ashe Jr. graduated from UCLA with a business degree in 1966, went on to serve as a lieutenant in the Army at West Point, and made education a lifelong pursuit. Dr. Johnson channeled his athletic ability and competitive into tennis. Arthur Ashe Jr. used the sport of tennis as a platform to move important issues forward that he cared so deeply about. Dr. Johnson, during the age of segregation, played host to the only tennis court and venue in Virginia where all races could play. In 1968, when Arthur Ashe won the first U.S. Open, a year later, 40 years ago, he founded the National Junior Tennis League as a way to bring tennis into the lives of kids across the country, regardless of class or race. Dr. Johnson used his influence, personal funds, and determination to fight for equal rights and to advance a sport in a way that would make the world proud. Now, to those of us who did not personally know Dr. Johnson, doesn't this sound familiar? Is there any question as to how Dr. Johnson had an impact on Arthur Ashe's life? Ladies and gentlemen, with my daughter Camera, the American Tennis Association, members, and the Johnson family, who are all here today, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Dr. Robert Walter Whirlwind Johnson into the International Tennis Hall of Fame, and here to accept is his grandson, Lange Johnson, representing his grandfather and their family today. Please give him a warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jeannie, thank you so much for that introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, members of the International Tennis Hall of Fame Nominating Committee, members of the class of 2009, it is a tremendous honor to be here with you today. This is no doubt a great day for the Johnson family, but more importantly, this is a great day for the sport of tennis. My grandfather, Dr. Robert Walter Whirlwind Johnson, was a great running back at Lincoln University, about 300 miles from here in the southeast corner of Pennsylvania. He was also a caring physician who established his medical practice in the tiny town of Lynchburg, Virginia. And one day, he decided to turn his passion for tennis into a cause that would be felt around the world. Dr. J came along at a time when a visionary was absolutely necessary in the sport. To be sure, he was a bit player in a much larger struggle to integrate the American society of the 1940s and 50s. Tennis was one front in that struggle where young Robert decided to see if he could move African Americans and tennis forward at the same time. The master plan was hatched in the summer of 1946 in Ohio. Dr. J and his good friend, Dr. Hubert Eaton, were watching the American Tennis Association's women's final, the African American equivalent to the United States Lawn Tennis Association. Althea Gibson, a raw 19-year-old, was in the midst of self-destructing against the steady, if unspectacular, Romania Peters. As the two men watched the match, Dr. J leaned over and said to his colleague, "I wish there was something we could do for that girl." They strategized from the stands, and as the match wore on and eventually wore out the frustrated Harlem resident, they decided they had a plan. At its conclusion, the two doctors approached Althea, and Dr. J asked, "How would you like to play at Forest Hills?" This completely stunned her. No African American had ever played at Forest Hills, then the site of the U.S. National Championships. Both men went on to open their homes and wallets to Althea in order to turn their vision into reality. They created a tennis boot camp in Lynchburg, Virginia, and an academic and social finishing school in Wilmington, North Carolina. And in 1950, just 4 years after Dr. J asked the question, Althea would go on to play Forest Hills. Althea would also go on to win 5 major singles titles during her career, most notably back-to-back winner of Wimbledon and the U.S. Open in '57 and '58. By the time Althea reached the gates of Forest Hills, a 12-year-old boy from Richmond, Virginia, had already arrived at Dr. J's Lynchburg home for the summer. Ronald Charity, an excellent player and coach in his own right, brought Arthur Robert Ashe Jr. to my grandfather's attention. By this time, Dr. J created the ATA Junior Development Program, and Arthur became his next star pupil. Arthur went on to win the first U.S. Open in '68 and Wimbledon in 1975. Arthur nor any other kid in the program need worry about balls, rackets, hitting partners, or entry fees. All that was necessary to be part of this social experiment was to follow Dr. J's code of conduct, which, oddly enough, required perfection. No displays of emotion, period. Balls that were 2 inches out were suddenly in. In this new world, the misbehavior or perceived misbehavior of one could taint the group, taint the race, and those coming behind them. Those whom the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad, he would always say. And those who made Dr. J mad by not following the program were not around very long. Arthur and dozens of other youth, some of whom are here today, like Bonnie Logan, Lenny Simpson, Leslie Allen, Doug Smith, Willis Thomas, I could go on forever, traveled together in a caravan of Buicks and Oldsmobiles, clothed in their tennis whites, while often being the only faces of color in tournaments in Greensboro, Knoxville, Little Rock, and Kalamazoo. This new world of integrated tennis that my grandfather helped forge shone a harsh spotlight on the African American players who went through the cracks created by Arthur and Althea. A small boy peered through the fence of Dr. J's court, watching, listening, waiting for his turn. That boy next door literally learned first by osmosis and then by years of training on the same court that Althea, Arthur, Bobby Riggs, Pauline Betzatti, and many others had played on. Juan Farrow became Dr. J's great final student. He was the national 12 and under champion and went back and won the national 14 and unders. My grandfather would not live to see Juan through, and I'm sure if he were alive today, that would be one of his biggest regrets. Perhaps dying on his greatest talent. 3 names are on Dr. J's tombstone: Althea, Arthur, and Juan, proving that the belief that it could be done was not only achievable, but also repeatable. The key mantra of my grandfather's life was, it can be done. No integration in big-time tennis? It can be done. No state-of-the-art tennis facilities and equipment for African-American players? Absolutely can be done. If he were here today, my grandfather would survey the game, and he would be delighted as well as disappointed. He would reflect that besides the great Venus and Serena Williams, there have been too few great African-American players. But he wouldn't hold a press conference denouncing the fact, because he was a visionary and a problem solver. He would begin by finding selfless tennis professionals and selling them on his vision, a vision of finding the best, most overlooked and underserved talent and providing these youth with a foundation for success in any endeavor they chose. And with your help and the help of people like Jeannie Ash, the Williams sisters, Billie Jean King, Bud Collins, Leslie Allen, Lenny Simpson, Katrina Adams, people who have shown a profound commitment to giving back to the sport, not only can it be done, but it will be done and better than ever before. Thank you.
I'm going to present it to Lance, and we're going to walk out and walk back. Lange, at this time, as chairman, it is my distinct honor on behalf of the Board of Directors and Executive Committee of the International Tennis Hall of Fame to present to you your grandfather's enshrinement certificate. Congratulations to you and your entire family and your friends.